The 7.5 cm Pak 40 was a German 75 mm anti-tank gun developed in 1939 to 1941 by Rheinmetall and used during the Second World War. The Pak 40 formed the backbone of German anti-tank guns for the latter part of World War II, mostly in towed form, but also on a number of tank destroyers such as the Marder series. Approximately 23,500 Pak 40s were produced. A modified version of the gun designed specifically for vehicle mounting was the 7.5 cm KWK-40, which differed primarily in using more compact ammunition, thereby allowing more rounds to be carried inside the vehicles. The KWK-40 armed many of the German mid-war tank and destroyer designs, replacing the Pak 40 in the later role. Depending on the source, the Pak 40 may be referred to as the 7.5 L46, referring to the barrel's length in calibers. There were two versions of the KWK-40, which would be referred to as the 7.5 L43 or 7.5 L48. Development of the Pak 40 began after reports of new Soviet tank designs began to reach Berlin in 1939. The 5 cm Pak 38 was still in testing at this point, but it appeared it would not be powerful enough to deal with these newer designs. Contracts were placed with Krupp and Rheinmetall to develop what was essentially a 7.5 cm version of the Pak 38. However, while the Pak 38 made extensive use of light alloys to reduce overall gun weight, these were now earmarked for Luftwaffe. As a result, the Pak 40 used steel throughout its construction and was proportionally heavier than the 5 cm model. To simplify production, the Pak 38's curved gun shield was replaced by one using 3 flat plates. The project was initially given low priority, but following the invasion of the USSR in 1941 and the appearance of heavily armored Soviet tanks such as the T-34 and KV-1, it was given an increased priority. The first pre-production guns were delivered in November 1941. In April 1942, the Wehrmacht had 44 guns in service. By 1943, the Pak 40 formed the bulk of German anti-tank artillery. Operational use. The Pak 40 was the standard German anti-tank gun until the end of the war, and was supplied by Germany to its allies. Some captured guns were used by the Red Army. After the war, the Pak 40 remained in service in several European armies, including Albania, Bulgaria, Czechoslovakia, Finland, Norway, Hungary and Romania. About 20,000 Pak 40s were produced, and about 3,500 more were used to arm tank destroyers. The unit manufacturing cost amounted to 2,200 man-hours at 12,000 Rum. A lighter automatic weapon system version incorporating a 12-round magazine, the heaviest of the Bordkanone series of heavy-caliber aircraft guns, was used as the BK-7-5 in the Henschel HS-129B3 ground attack aircraft and the Junkers Ju-88P-1 bomber destroyer, and even intended as a production fitment for a possible He-177A3R5 heavy bomber adaptation late in 1942. Originally prototyped in the field with BK-5 cannons, themselves adapted from the 5 cm KWK-39 tank gun from the Panzer III. Performance. The weapon was effective against almost every Allied tank until the end of the war. The Pak 40 was much heavier than the Pak 38. Its decreased mobility meant that it was difficult or even impossible to move without an artillery tractor on boggy ground. The Pak-40 was first used in the USSR where it was needed to combat the newest Soviet tanks. It was designed to fire the same low-capacity APCBC, HE&HL projectiles that had been standardized for use in the long-barreled Kampfwagenkanon KWK-40 tank-mounted guns of the mid-war and later marks of the Panzer IV medium tank. In addition, there was an APCR shot for the Pak-40, a munition which, reliant on supplies of tungsten, eventually became very scarce. According to the German Panzertruppen News Journal, 5,000 APCR rounds were expected in December 1942 as replenishment for the winter offensive. The main differences amongst the rounds fired by 75 mm German guns were in the length and shape of the cartridge cases as well as the primers used. The 7.5 cm KWK-40 used in tanks had a fixed cartridge case twice the length of that used by the 7.5 cm KWK-37, the short-barreled 75 mm used on earlier tanks, and the 7.5 cm Pak-40 cartridge was a third longer than that used by the KWK-40. The Pak-40 used a percussion primer, while the vehicle-mounted 75 mm guns used electrical primers. Other than minor differences with the projectile's driving bands, all German 75 mm guns used the same 75 mm projectiles. The longer cartridge case of the Pak-40 allowed a larger charge to be used and a higher velocity for the PZGR-39 armor-piercing capped ballistic cap round to be achieved. The muzzle velocity was about 790 meters per second as opposed to 740 meters per second for the KWK-40L-43 and 750 meters per second for the L-48. For unknown reasons, some 75 mm APCBC cartridges appear to have been produced with a charge that gave a muzzle velocity of about 770 meters per second. The first documented firing by the US of a Pak-40 recorded an average muzzle velocity of 776 meters per second for its 9 most instrumented firings. Probably because of these results, period intelligence publications gave about 770 meters per second as the Pak-40 APCBC muzzle velocity. Post-war publications corrected this. German sources differ. The official firing table document for the 75 mm KWK-40, Stuck-40, and the Pak-40 dated October 1943 gives 770 meters per second on one of the APCBC tables. General characteristics: caliber 75 mm. Barrel length L46, rifling 32 grooves, right hand increasing twist 1/24 to 1/18. Length with the carriage 6.2 meters, length 3.70 meters, width 2.0 meters, height 1.25 meters. Weight 1,425 kilograms. Traverse 65 degrees. Elevation -5 degrees to +22 degrees. Rate of fire 14 rounds per minute. Engagement range 1,800 meters. Indirect range 7,678 meters. Projectile weight 3.18 to 6.8 kilograms. Ammunition: Panzergranate 39, an armor-piercing, capped ballistic cap projectile with explosive filler and tracer. Weight of projectile 6.80 kilograms. Muzzle velocity 790 meters per second. Panzergranate 40, an armor-piercing, composite rigid projectile with a sub-caliber tungsten core. Weight of projectile 4.05 kilograms. Muzzle velocity 990 meters per second. Panzergranate 38 HL-B, a high-explosive anti-tank projectile with a shaped charge. Weight of projectile 4.57 kg. Muzzle velocity 450 meters per second. Survivors. Pak-40s have been held in several military museums. Outside museums are free entrance open airfields.